Mishnah. Kol hanechal b'shor hagadol. 84. Pei daled amud aleph. Kol hanechal b'shor hagadol. Any part of the animal that's eaten by an ox.
Happy.
Where an ox is harder to cook, and everything that is destined to be hard is already hard. By a goat, which is soft for achilas pesach, but those items that are not edible by an ox, those same organs you wouldn't eat by a goat either. Even though now they're moist, even though later on they're going to become hard. This is like the cartilage by the ribs. Those can be eaten because they're soft. And they're roy lachila. Therefore, people are subscribing to the Korban Pesach can subscribe to those parts as well. So Rabbi showed a steer. It's not. Kids, could you guys go in the play? Kids, I'm teaching. No, Charlotte, could you guys go into the playroom and play now, please? Thank you. Rabbi Rami, it's not. Kol hanechal b'shor hagadol. Any item, organ that could be eaten by an ox, yachal b'diarach. B'shein hanechal, those items that by an ox you can't eat, even though now by the goat it's soft, we don't eat. But ema seifa, roshek knafayim v'sachsuchim. Now these cartilages, hani lo misakli b'shor hagadol. Those are examples of things that you don't eat by an ox, yet you're allowed to eat by a gedi. That goes against what the Mishnah is saying. So ela tanoi. In fact, our Mishnah is showing a machlokas tanoi. V'achik tani. This is how you have to read our Mishnah. Kol hanechal b'shor hagadol. Any item that's eaten by an ox, yachal b'diarach can be eaten by a goat. Those items she'eino nechal by an ox, lo. So that's one Tana. V'yeshomrim, another Tana says that af roshek nafayim v'zachsuchim can be eaten by a goat, even though you don't eat them by an ox. Rava says it's not a machlokas tanoim. The Mishnah is in a structure of an explanatory structure, meaning mahen ktani. The Mishnah is a thing. Give us an example of what you were talking about. Hachitani. Kol hanechal b'shor hagadol b'shlaka. Anything that can be eaten with an ox if you cook it for a long period of time. Can also yayachal b'diarach b'tzli. That same tissue, organ, item, roasted by a goat can also be eaten. What's an example? Ma'ayin roshek nafayim v'zachsuchim. This a cartilage rib thing, which is, if you cook it for a long period of time by an ox, can be eaten. So then, therefore, that's why you can eat it by roasting it by a goat. Tani kavosei de Rava. There's a brisa to support the way Rava taught. Kol hanechal b'shor hagadol b'shlaka. Whatever can be eaten by an ox through long cooking, yayachal b'diarach b'tzli. So if you roast it by a goat, you can also eat it. Umayin. What's the example?
By the way, it's very apropos. You're learning about an ox today. You know, today's Chinese New Year. It's called the year of the ox.
The ox.
This year is the year of the ox. Wow.
Yeah, the year of the ox. So it's
very apropos.
Today's a triple whammy. You know what today's? Today's Rosh Chodesh Adar.
Yes.
Right. And basically, it's also Chinese New Year.
Yes.
And it also is the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. So hopefully,
February 12th. That's correct.
And we had hopefully
Ernie.
Yes.
Today is my mother-in-law's yurtzeit.
Okay.
You can do this in her honor. It's Sarah Bas David.
Okay. The learning in honor
Sarah
of
Bas David.
Sarah Bas David.
Okay. You see, you got a lot of whammies today, Ernie.
Right. The soft tendons are treated like meat, and you can subscribe if you're subscribing to the Korban Pesach based on those items. Itmar. We learned in the Baraisa, Gidin Shasoifen Lahakshas. Right now, these tendons are soft, but if you cook them long enough, they're going to become hard. So what's the din? Can you subscribe them? Are they considered meat or not? Rabbi Yochanan Amri, ninin alein b'Pesach. We go after the way it is now. Since now it's soft, we don't care about what's going to be later on. And therefore, you're allowed to subscribe to such tendons. Reish Lakish Amar ein ninin alein b'Pesach, because we look at what is at the end. Rav Yochanan Amar ninin alein because basar hashta azlina. We go after the present. What is its status currently? Reish Lakish Amar ein ninin alein because basar basof azlina. Since in the end these tendons are going to become very, very hard, it's not considered meat, and you can't subscribe to them. So Reish Lakish is going to ask a kasha of Rabbi Yochanan. Eitz for Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan. Kol hanechel b'shra gadol. Our Mishnah, whatever item is eaten by an ox, yochel b'di arak. Umahen. What's an example? Roshei knafayim v'asachsuchim. But that implies hani in. Only those is an example. Aval gidin shesoifen la'akshois. But tendons that later on are going to get hard, you cannot subscribe. So it's a kasha of Rabbi Yochanan. Amr lei Tana hani vuadin lahanach. The Tana learns the sachsuchim, and also he means to teach regarding the sinews that become hard as well. Hani maitai b'adaha misakli b'shra gadol b'shloka. Why did you say by the gedi arach you could eat it? Because if you cook it for a long period of time by an ox, it becomes edible. Hanach nami misakli b'shra gadol b'shloka. So these items, these tendons, can also become edible if you cook them for a long time. When you appeared in front of Ravavo, Ramilei, you showed you a stira. That is it correct? The way you learned that Rabbi Yochanan held that tendons that are destined to become hard are considered meat? They go into the playroom. Alma basar hashazlinon, and that Rav Yochanan is going after what the status of it is currently. Reish Lakish add from Rav Yochanan or haroish shel egel, the hide of this, like the scalp of a calf. Maushi yitame, is it considered meat? So it would become tummy. Amr lo ein mitame. Why? Because if you cook this long enough, it becomes hard. Alma basar b'soifazlina. So you see, Rav Yochanan seems to be holding like Reish Lakish as well, that you go after basoif. Amr lei the Ramal Chahach like kash kimcha. Whoever taught you this paraisa didn't sort of chew his flour well enough, because hahadar Rav Yochanan gabi Reish Lakish. Eventually, Rabbi Yochanan changed his opinion and held like Reish Lakish. Don't give me a problem because of a Mishnah that was a das yachid. I hold that we go after basoy fazlina. In fact, that's the halacha. Anything that is destined to become hard would not have the status of meat. You were not allowed to subscribe to the Korban Pesach for that item. Mishnah. By the way, tomorrow night we'll learn at 7:00. Okay?
All right.
There's a lav that says etzem lo ruvo. Don't break a bone of a Korban Pesach. So if you break a bone of a Korban Pesach, if the Korban Pesach is a roi tohor Korban Pesach, harez loikar boim, you get malchus. Avala moiser batohor. But let's say you leave over basar from a Korban Pesach, and it was a tohor Korban Pesach. Vashoiver b'tomei, you break the bone of a Korban Pesach that became tomei. Ain't a locus arboim, you don't get malchus. So the Gemara wants to know why. Bishlam moiser b'tor, you leave over noiser by a tohor Korban Pesach, you don't get malchus. That's, we understand why. The Tanya. Loy soy siru mimenu ad boiker. Don't leave noiser over. V'hanoiser mimenu ad boiker by eish tisrofu. Ba kosuv litin aseh achar lois aseh. There's an assay of burning the noiser, which corrects the lav. This is called a lav anitik laseh. Loimer shein loike de Rabbi Yehuda. Anytime that there's a lav anitik laseh, you don't get malchus. Rabbi Yaakov Oimer loimer Hashem uzeh. I agree that you don't get malchus, but it's not for the same reason. Ella noisers mishum davale lav shein bo maisa. For example, if I do a lav where there's a maisa, where there's an action, so then I get malchus. But noiser, all I do is sit on my hands and don't do anything. So it's a lav she'en b'maisa. And lav she'en b'maisa and loikin a lav. So then I understand why if you leave over a noiser korban pesach that's tohor, there's no malchus. Where do you learn that if I break the bone of a korban pesach that's tameh, that there's no malchus? The Omar Kra, the etzem lo sijru vo b'kosher v'lo b'pasul. The korban pesach has to be kosher in order to violate that lav. If it's pasul, then there's no malchus. Ton rabbanon etzem lo sijru vo b'kosher v'lo b'pasul. The lav is only by kosher dika korban pesach. Rabbi Yoimer b'vayis echad yeyachel. The etzem lo sijruvo, which connects the ability to eat the korban pesach with the love of breaking the bone. Kol haroy lachila, if it's capable of being eaten, yesh bo mishum shvis etzem, then there's a love of breaking the bone. V'she'ein roy lachila, ein bo mishum shvis etzem. Now, my binayu, what's the nafkamina between bo b'kosher v'lo b'pasul versus this limud of Rabbi? On Rabbi Yirmiyah, Pesach haba b'tumei kibinai. When got 51% of klais are tumei, and nevertheless the korban pesach is brought, that would be enough kamina. Leman davar kosher, the one who says that in order to have the lav of shviras etzem, it's got to be a kosher dikka korban pesach. Well, this is not a kosher dikka korban pesach. It's pasul because it's tumei. So shvira would not be a lav. Leman davar roy lachila, hanami roy lachilu. Pesach haba b'tumei, you're allowed to eat. So if it's based on the ability to eat it, even though it's tamei, you're allowed to eat it. And then there would be a lav of shviras etzem. Rav Yosef Omer ki gavna l'kulam ein bo mishum shviras etzem. Rav Yosef says, no, everybody would agree that there would be no lav of shviras etzem in the case of Pesach haba b'tumah. The Rebbe lakuli ka'asi. Rebbe has come to be makel. The high hapasulhu. And according to Pesach haba b'tumah is clearly pasul. Ela high saloshasa kosher v'nifsal ikibinai. The nafkamina between Rebbe and the Tanakama of vo v'lo b'kosher v'lo b'pasul has to do with the korban pesach that at one time would have been able to be eaten and then became pasul. Lamanda amar kosher. High kosher who? Since it was kosher, then there's a lav of shviras etzem. Lemandam roy lachila, but I hashed the lav roy lachila. Now it's not roy lachila because it became nifsal. Abaya Amar really kula amal kolki I gab neim bo mishum shviras etzem. In that case as well, even if it had a shasa kosher v'nifsal, everybody would agree there would be no lav of shviras etzem. My timer. Because hashtami is hapasalu. In the end, it's pasul. Now, so who cares that it had a shasa kosher? Ella, the nafkamina would be shviras etzem bod yom ikibinai. Is there a lav of shviras etzem in the daytime before nightfall? The mandam are kosher as long as you need a kosher dikka korban. There's a lav of shviras etzem, so high kosher. But the mandam are roy lachila, like Rabbi. You're not allowed to eat the korban pesach in the daytime. You have to wait till nightfall. Hash to lav barachilu. So, Meis, I'll ask you a kasha. Rabbi Oimer, nimnin al moyach sheberosh. People who are subscribing to the korban pesach can subscribe even on the marrow that's in the skull. The ain't nimnin al moyach shebekulius. But the bone marrow and the femur, they cannot subscribe. On Moach Shabarosh my time, and why can they subscribe to that marrow? because you don't have to break any bone to get at it. You can, through the various orifices of the skull, you can sort of pick at it and get at it without breaking the bone. And if you're telling me that you'd be allowed to break a bone of a Korban Pesach in the daytime, so then Kul Yisnami, the bone, the femur bone, if you tell me it might be permitted, since it's not royal achil in the daytime, to break the bone, you've cooked it already, break the bone, take the marrow out, then let people subscribe to it. So we see that we're not allowed to do that. Must be that there's still a lav shviras etzem even in the daytime when it's not royal achil. Well, based on that, the way you're learning, that even at nightfall, Nesi Gumrasa, you could have brought a coal, the Nechos Saleh, and put it on the bone. The Nikla, it would sort of burn a hole in the bone. It's not breaking it. The Nafka Lamochti, and take out the marrow. The Nimni Alai. And how do you know you can do it? Atanya, you cannot break a bone. Aval hasoyref batzamis, if you burn it. V'amachatech bagidin, or you break it near the tendon. There's no lav of shviras etzem. The reason perhaps why you can't put the coal, maybe it'll explode and you'll be over the lav of shvira. And Rava Omer Mishum Hefsid Kotchim, be a dayim, you're sort of ruining Kotchim. To come off Sid be a day. Maybe the fire will burn some of the marrow that could be eaten. So therefore, since we don't allow to do it at night, because of the problems we raised Abai and Rava, we don't allow it. It's a gzeir. We don't allow to do it in the daytime, even though technically you'd be allowed to do it mikaradin. Rav Papa Omar, Kol Ki Ai Gavna, everything you've mentioned, Kol Ami Yesh Bo Mishum Esrei Etzem, there would still be a lav of Shir Etzem. My time, because at night, this Korban Pesach is going to be roy to be eaten. So you certainly cannot break the bone in the afternoon, even though right now you can't eat it, because at night it's going to be roy. So there would certainly be a lav of Shir Etzem in the afternoon. Rather, you have a limb that was removed from the walls of Yerushalayim, and not the whole limb. So the din is you got to cut off the limb that left Yerushalayim. Mandam are kosher. So the one who said kosher v'lo b'pasul. So the inner part is kosher. So that part, you'd not be allowed to break the bone. But the Rebbe who held that it relates to whether you can eat it or not, the place that you break it is not roy lachila. But let's say the whole limb was taken out, and therefore it had a shasa kosher nifsal. So everybody would hold there would be no shviras, no lav of shviras etzem. Where do we see that it's not barachilo? A limb, part of the limb was removed outside of Yerushalayim, and then you broke it off at that point, right? You have a long limb. This part of the limb is outside Yerushalayim, so you break it. That limb you throw away. The remainder you want to keep. There's no problem in doing that. Because since that part is not roy lachila, there's no iser shvira setze. That would be the machlokas between the one who learns from boy and Rebbe. Rav Sheshes by Rav Idi Amar, Kol Ki Ai Gavna, what you're discussing about an aver shiyotzu miktzoso, Kulam ein bo mishum shviras etzem. Everybody would hold that there's no shviras etzem. Josh? Asher, could you take her into the other room? Yeah, Josh. The kulam ein bo mishum shviras etzem. The high aver apostle. This limb has become a puzzle dik aver. Rather, shviras etzem beno ikibinau. You have a raw korban pesach, hasn't been cooked. Mandam kosher, high kosher. Still a kosher pesach. Umandam roy lachila, ashtain roy lachila. You can't cook it, no. You can't undercook it, and therefore, if you undercooked it, there would be no lava shviras etzem. There would still be shviras etzem. My time, it would still be able to be eaten because the matvilah you can cook it, roast it, v'achale. Ela shviras ha'alya ikibinai. The tail, could you break the tailbone? L'mandavar kosher, high kosher. It's certainly kosher. L'mandavar roy lachila, high ain't a roy lachila. Why? The ayil gavosaka. They used to, the tail was put on the mizbeach. They was not eaten. So since this is an item that was not eaten, there's no lava shviras etzem. Rav Ashi Amar, everybody would agree with that. Koki agavna vada ein bo mishum shviras etzem. Now vada ein roy lachila klal. Nobody would hold that there's shviras etzem in there, not even the one who holds kosher, because it's nobody can eat it. Ela ever she'ein alav kazayis basar ikibina. You have a limb which doesn't have a kazayis basar on the limb. Lamanda amar kosher, high kosher. But lamanda baroy lachila beinin shir achila veleka. You need a limb in order to subscribe to it. Needs at least a shir kazayis on it, which is a shir achila. So therefore, on such a limb, there would be no lava shviras etzem. Ravina Amar Kolki, I got no less than so everybody would agree with that. The bein and shir achila. Nobody would disagree, even the one who says kosher, there's no shir achila here. At the place you break the bone, there was no kazayis basar. But yeshalav kazayis basar b'makom acher ikibinai. There is a kazayis further down the bone. Lemanda amar kosher, high kosher hu. Lemanda barei lachila bein in shir achila b'makom shvira. The one you need shir achila at the place that you break the bone, and this place doesn't have it. And Tanya Karbominai, the Gemara is going to quote a Baraisa that supports 4 of the tirutzim we gave. The Tanya, Rabbi Oimer, B'vayis echad yeyachel, the etzem lo sishvuvo. It says, in one house you shall eat it, and don't break the bone. Ala kosher uchayv and uchayv ala pos. That teaches you got to be able to eat the korban pesach. It's got to be kosher, and therefore you're not chayv shviras etzem if it's not, if it's possible. You know what? At one point it was roy to eaten, but later on that night, at the time of eating, it became possible. So ein bo mishum shviras etzem. Yesh bo shir achila. If the limb has enough kazayis on it, yesh bo mishum shviras etzem. Ein bo shir achila, ein bo mishum shviras etzem, which is like another mandamer we quoted. Then we talked about the alya, the tail. Aroy lemizbech ein bo mishum shviras etzem. There's no break. If you break the tailbone, you haven't violated anything because it goes to the mizbeach. And then b'shas achila yesh bo mishum shviras etzem, which is at night. Shelo b'shas achila, like in the afternoon, ein bo mishum shviras etzem. Itmar. Aver shein alav kazayis bas makom zeh. You have a limb. It doesn't have kazayis here, but yesh alav kazayis bas makom acher. Rav Yochanan Amar yesh bo mishum shviras etzem. Rav Yochanan says there's shviras etzem. Reish Lakish Amar ein bo mishum shviras etzem. There is no shviras etzem. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and we will pick up tomorrow night, 7:00.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Good Shabbos, everybody.
Thank you, Ernie. Enjoy yourself. Let me see a picture of her.
Amazing. This is like amazing here.
Hello.